When Stephanie White lashed out at fans for being toxic, she triggered more than a media storm. She exposed a widening rift in the league. Her name was at the center of it all. Her supporters, who've driven historic ratings and ticket sales, felt targeted and betrayed. Meanwhile, the real sources of toxicity, player misconduct, divisive locker room politics, and organizational dishonesty, went unmentioned. The reaction? An uproar demanding White's removal and renewed scrutiny of how leadership is handling internal chaos. What's unfolding is a battle over who gets to shape the narrative and who gets scapegoated when it falls apart. The video digs into how Clark's rise has shaken up the WNBA's power dynamics, with some leaders now seemingly downplaying her impact even as they profit from it. It asks tough questions about accountability, fairness, and whether the league is ready to confront uncomfortable truths. Because in the end, protecting the league's future won't come from silencing criticism. It'll come from real leadership that doesn't flinch when it's time to look inward.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
That's the headline that stopped everyone cold and set the internet ablaze. But no, this wasn't an actual trade. It was something even more dramatic, a figurative trade, made with words, not contracts. In a single podcast appearance, Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White managed to do what no one thought possible. She threw Caitlin Clark's fanbase under the bus while pretending to address the league's problems. And people are not letting it slide. Let's start with what actually happened. Stephanie White appeared on a podcast and publicly described fans, specifically the ones supporting Caitlin Clark, as toxic. Her words weren't vague. They weren't harmless. They were a direct hit, and people heard them loud and clear. Her remarks ignited immediate backlash, especially given the context. Fans were already on edge after months of watching the league fail to protect Clark on the court and in the media. Now, they're being told they're the problem? This wasn't just a case of a coach speaking out of frustration. This was a calculated choice. White could have used her platform to address the real tensions boiling inside the WNBA. The messy internal politics, the inconsistent leadership, the obvious mishandling of injuries, and the racial tensions that have quietly fueled division. But instead of accountability, she opted for deflection. Instead of looking inward, she pointed outward, straight at the people keeping the league alive. Because let's be honest, Clark supporters are the reason the WNBA is having a moment. Her impact has been immediate and undeniable. She's brought in record-breaking TV ratings, sold-out arenas, jersey sellouts, and a huge influx of new fans. She's the face of the league's current growth, whether the old guard wants to admit it or not. And yet, somehow, it's her fans that are now being painted as the villains. Stephanie White didn't criticize any of the players who've disrespected fans. She didn't mention the booing. She didn't mention racially charged comments. She didn't say a word about the teams that lied to the public about player injuries. Instead, she went for the easiest target, the fan base. And not just any fan base, but the one that's single-handedly keeping the league relevant in the public eye. There's a reason why this moment hit such a nerve. Fans have watched for weeks as Clark has been shoved on the court, snubbed by other players, and treated like a threat instead of an asset. And now, on top of that, they're being told they are the toxic ones, that they're the reason the league is facing negativity. It's not just offensive, it's absurd. The truth is the toxicity didn't start with the fans. It started within the league itself. The WNBA has been dealing with player drama, locker room tension, and organizational dysfunction for years. There have been racial accusations with no follow-up. There have been injuries hidden from the public. There's been a persistent, visible resistance to giving Clark her flowers, even when it's clear she's earned them. And none of that comes from the fans. But the real kicker? The double standard. Because when players show poor sportsmanship or lash out at supporters, it's conveniently ignored. When organizations manipulate injury narratives or play politics behind the scenes, it's swept under the rug. But when fans react, when they demand better, suddenly, they're the problem? That kind of blame shifting isn't just bad leadership, it's cowardly. And it's especially dangerous in a moment where the league actually has a chance to grow. For the first time in years, the WNBA is front-page news. Corporate sponsors are paying attention. National networks are broadcasting games in prime time. Attendance is up. Salaries are rising. And all of that is happening because Caitlin Clark brought in a wave of attention the league wasn't prepared for. Instead of welcoming it, certain corners of the league are trying to control it and now attack it. Clark's impact is measurable. Her presence has increased the bottom line for players and teams alike. The money is real. The audience is real. The opportunity is real. So when leadership ignores that, when they act like she's just another rookie or pretend her fans are some kind of hostile takeover, it's not just disrespectful. It's self-sabotage. Let's not pretend this is just about one podcast comment. This is part of a larger pattern, a refusal to address real problems, a tendency to let player misconduct slide while over-policing fan behavior, a culture where leadership chooses silence when it comes to dysfunction, but finds its voice when it's time to scold supporters. That's not how you grow a league. If Stephanie White had used her platform to call out all sources of toxicity, including players and organizations, this would be a very different conversation. But she didn't. She singled out the people who've been filling seats, boosting ratings, and spending money. And now those people are asking, why are we being blamed for reacting to a system that clearly doesn't want to be held accountable? You can't talk about growing the game while alienating the people who are making that growth possible. You can't claim to value fan engagement while insulting your biggest demographic. And you definitely can't ignore the role that leadership plays in shaping league culture while pretending it's all just fan hysteria. Fans didn't create this atmosphere. The league did, through mismanagement, inconsistency, and selective outrage. It's not the fans who turned Caitlin Clark into a lightning rod. It's the players who booed her. It's the coaches who refused to defend her. It's the league offices that downplayed her impact while happily cashing the checks that her name brought in. The fans just showed up and then got attacked for caring. And here's the consequence. People are walking away. Slowly, maybe quietly for now, but they are. Because no one wants to invest in a league that calls them toxic while protecting the real sources of dysfunction. No one wants to stay loyal to a system that demands silence when things go wrong. This isn't just about Clark. It's about the message being sent, that fans are expendable, replaceable, or worse, part of the problem. That kind of thinking doesn't build unity. It doesn't grow the game. It fractures it. The WNBA is at a turning point. It can address these issues head-on, acknowledge the internal problems, support its rising stars, and actually listen to the fans who are keeping the sport alive. Or it can keep pointing fingers, deflecting blame, and hoping people stay loyal while being disrespected. Stephanie White's comments were more than a PR blunder. They were a warning sign. A reminder that the league still hasn't figured out how to handle the responsibility that comes with growth. And if leadership doesn't change course soon, this moment, the biggest the WNBA has ever had, could slip away. What do you think? Was White out of line? Is this the tipping point for the league, or just another controversy that will get brushed aside? Hit like if you're tired of the blame game. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is a conversation that's long overdue. And if you're sticking around to see how the league handles this mess, subscribe. Because this isn't the end. Not even close. Let's keep going, because the deeper you go into this story, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just about a podcast comment, or even about Stephanie White alone. This controversy pulled back the curtain on how leadership in the WNBA responds to pressure, to growth, and most importantly, to truth. White made the conscious choice to call out fans as toxic. She didn't flinch. She didn't qualify it. And by doing that, she exposed how far some people within the league are willing to go to dodge real accountability. What should have been a conversation about league culture, internal tensions, and leadership responsibility got spun into yet another blame the fans narrative. But people aren't buying it anymore. This is a fan base that has shown up consistently, especially in the Caitlin Clark era. We're talking about sold-out games in markets that previously struggled to fill seats. Skyrocketing jersey sales. National news coverage. Corporate sponsors knocking on the door. And who's behind all of that? Fans. The same fans who are now being painted as the source of the league's toxicity. It's not just wrong, it's offensive. And worse, it's dangerous. Because leadership is now sending a message that they're more interested in controlling the optics than actually fixing what's broken. Look at the timing. These comments didn't drop in a vacuum. They landed after months of controversy surrounding how Caitlin Clark has been treated by other players. Repeatedly disrespected on the court. Openly targeted during games. Frozen out during press moments. The silence from leadership through all of this? Deafening. No statement. No league-wide push for accountability. Just vague nods to passion and competitiveness like it's all part of the game. Then, when fans speak out about it, when they express frustration at the double standards and call for fair treatment, that's when someone finally decides to speak. And not to defend the integrity of the game. Not to address player behavior or leadership failure, but to call the fans toxic. The audacity. It's become obvious. The league wants all the benefits of Caitlin Clark's popularity without confronting the uncomfortable realities that come with it. They want the ticket sales and the headlines. They want the ESPN bump, but they don't want to protect her. They don't want to address how her presence has exposed deeper fractures within the league. And they definitely don't want to call out players whose actions are stoking the division. That's what makes White's remarks so frustrating. Instead of using her position to speak truth to power, she redirected all of that energy into blaming the people outside the system. The ones who have no control over locker room politics, player behavior, or media narratives. Fans didn't build this tension. The league did. And here's the thing. This is not new. The WNBA has long struggled with internal politics and uneven discipline. There have been clear cases of players disrespecting opponents, teams withholding injury updates to mislead the public, and even explosive racial accusations that evaporated under scrutiny. Yet, leadership rarely takes a public stand. When they do respond, it's often behind closed doors or with watered-down statements that say nothing. Meanwhile, fans who demand fairness? Instantly labeled problematic. That kind of double standard will rot an organization from the inside out. Because it shows the league values control over connection. It tells fans, you're here to support, not to question. But the truth is, fans are paying attention. They see the hypocrisy. They know when someone's being protected and when someone's being sacrificed. And right now, it's Caitlin Clark and her fans who are being thrown to the wolves while the real issues go untouched. Let's be crystal clear. Clark isn't the problem. Her fans aren't the problem. The problem is a leadership structure that refuses to call things what they are. A culture that chooses silence over solidarity. And a growing insecurity among players and coaches who feel threatened by a shift in power they didn't create. That's why White's comments hit like a sucker punch. Because they didn't just insult fans, they exposed the league's playbook. Redirect, deflect, protect the status quo. Even if it means sacrificing the people who are showing up the loudest. And what's worse, this doesn't just hurt fans. It hurt players too. Because when leadership doesn't set clear standards, when they don't protect rising stars or hold veterans accountable, it creates chaos. It breeds resentment between players. It turns every game into a narrative war. It fuels fan division and gives media exactly what they want. Controversy without resolution. That kind of culture isn't just unsustainable, it's toxic. The very thing White tried to blame on fans is actually festering inside the league itself. And unless leadership is willing to name it, face it, and fix it, it's only going to get worse. Caitlin Clark didn't walk into the league asking to be the face of anything. She came to play. But the second she stepped on the court, the dynamic shifted. And instead of adapting, parts of the league pushed back. Not because she wasn't good, but because her success threatened the old order. And two, now, instead of building a unified front around her momentum, we're watching the league fumble it. Disrespect on the court, selective praise, and now, public blame aimed directly at her fans. It's a pattern, and fans see it. And here's the fallout. Fans are starting to disengage. Not because they don't love the game, but because they're tired of being disrespected. They're tired of having their loyalty questioned while leadership fails to show any of their own. They're tired of seeing the most visible star in women's basketball take hit after hit while the league stays quiet. White's comments didn't just trigger outrage. They confirmed suspicions that the league would rather protect internal dysfunction than speak uncomfortable truths. That calling out fan behavior is easier than confronting player misconduct. That leadership would rather throw Clark supporters under the bus than confront what's really dividing the league. And let's be honest, there is division, the mishandled racial tensions, the organizational lies about injuries, the unspoken jealousy toward Clark's media dominance. It's all part of the undercurrent. And pretending fans are the root of that. That's not just lazy, it's insulting. The league is playing a dangerous game because the people they're alienating are the ones who've made this moment possible. Without Clark's rise, the ratings don't move. The salaries don't rise. The national attention doesn't happen. She's the catalyst. And if you insult her fans, you insult the foundation of this growth. There's still time to fix this. But it starts with leadership, real leadership. The kind that doesn't hide behind vague language or throw fans under a bus. The kind that names bad behavior, protects its players, and unites its audience. The kind that holds everyone to the same standard. Stephanie White had an opportunity to show that kind of leadership. She chose the opposite, and now the league has a choice to make. Continue down this path, doubling down on division and blame, or finally confront the dysfunction that's holding it back. Because the truth is, Caitlin Clark won't be the last star to rise. But if this is how the league treats its biggest asset, don't expect the next one to stick around. Let's take it all the way. Because if there's one thing this whole situation has proven, it's that the WNBA is staring down a crisis of identity. Not because fans are unruly, not because Caitlin Clark has too much hype, and certainly not because her supporters are passionate about the game. No, the crisis is rooted in leadership's refusal to acknowledge who and what is actually driving the league forward, and the growing resentment that's festering as a result. Stephanie White's comments didn't create that tension. They just amplified it. They gave a microphone. They made the quiet part loud. The second she called out fan toxicity, she exposed a deeper truth that some people inside the league see this new wave of attention, not as a breakthrough, but as a threat. That Clark's success and the audience she brings with her are treated like an inconvenient disruption rather than a golden opportunity. And here's where things get especially twisted. The league is benefiting massively from everything they're downplaying. Ticket sales are up. Sponsorships are rolling in. Players, all players, are getting raises. Viewership has exploded. National conversations are happening every single week. But somehow, we're pretending that this didn't all kick in a high gear the second Caitlin Clark went pro. If leadership won't admit that, fans will. And that's exactly what they've been doing on social media, in forums, in interviews. They're calling out the silence, the selective criticism, the obvious double standards. And instead of being heard, they're being blamed. That's where White's remarks felt like such a betrayal. Because it wasn't just a coach offering a hot take. It was a clear signal that leadership isn't willing to look in the mirror. That they'd rather point the finger outward than ask tough questions about what's really poisoning the atmosphere. What about the player misconduct? The booing of fans? The clear, racially charged accusations that were never substantiated? What about the repeated disrespect toward Clark from within the league, from athletes and media figures who are supposed to be growing the game? None of that gets mentioned. None of that gets publicly addressed. But the second fans react, now that's a crisis? The hypocrisy is loud. And fans aren't stupid. They're not just watching the games. They're watching the dynamics. They're watching how certain players are protected, how others are targeted, how leadership chooses to stay silent when it suits them, then suddenly finds a voice when it's time to scold the people buying tickets and boosting ratings. Let's be real. No one wants a league where fans are walking on eggshells, where voicing frustration means being labeled part of the problem, where supporting a player who's clearly carrying the league's momentum makes you a target. People don't stick around for that. And that's the risk here. That all of this, the momentum, the media attention, the cultural relevance, it gets squandered. Because instead of building a league rooted in transparency, accountability, and unity, Leadership is reinforcing a culture of silence and deflection. It's not sustainable. Not when the league's recent rise is so closely tied to one player's success and the fandom she's brought in. If that fan base walks, the numbers don't just dip, they collapse. This isn't a theory. It's a financial reality. Clark's influence is quantifiable, and alienating her supporters doesn't just insult them. It risks destabilizing the entire ecosystem. So what now? Does the league course correct? Does it finally take a real, hard look at the culture it's allowing to fester? Or does it keep leaning into denial, hoping the controversy dies down while the long-term damage quietly accumulates? Because here's the truth no one in the upper offices wants to say out loud. The WNBA doesn't have the luxury of playing defense with its own fan base. Not now. Not when people are finally watching. Not when the sport is finally breaking into mainstream conversations. That kind of momentum is rare and fragile. Stephanie White's comments? They weren't just ill-advised. They were reckless. They undermined the fans, shifted blame, and doubled down on a narrative that has already alienated a massive portion of the league's most engaged audience. But more than anything, they proved just how out of touch some parts of the league still are. The people showing up, the ones driving the metrics, they deserve better. And so does Caitlin Clark. She didn't ask to be the face of a league, but she is, whether the old guard likes it or not. And pretending otherwise doesn't change the reality. It just delays the inevitable reckoning. So where do you stand in all this? Are you one of the fans who's been called toxic just for caring? Do you think the league has a responsibility to confront its own flaws before calling out the crowd? And most importantly, can the WNBA survive this moment without real accountability? Let's talk about it in the comments. Hit the like button if you're not here for blame games. Share this with someone who's been keeping receipts. And subscribe if you're following the fallout, because this league is standing on the edge, and the next move matters more than ever.